Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today, part of the Office Hours with Dr. Kelly series. We're kicking off with a really awesome guest, a gentleman named Charles Barrett, who's going to be talking about it's about the children and bringing your whole professional self to the equation. So without any further ado, let's jump into this. I want to give you guys as much time to learn and hear some awesome things from Dr. Barrett, but we're changing the format a little bit today too. If we could go to the agenda slide. We're going to be following a little bit of a different format today. We're going to have a shortened presentation and we're going to have enhanced discussion. And obviously we're going to have audience interactivity with Q&A at the very end. But without any further ado, let's move this along. I just want to introduce who we are for those of you who are joining us for the first time. We are Eluma. We work in special ed and in mental health support for K-12. And we provide all of our services online and provide supporting technology to do so. And so we've been doing this for about 10 years and we have over 300 dedicated members serving states all across the country, and we're soon going to be crossing the threshold of 30,000 students. So if you don't know who we are, don't know anything about us, we invite you to come check us out at our website. If you like this webinar and this kind of content, we definitely invite you to follow us on Twitter. We'll be updating you continually with all of the latest and greatest. And of course, we're on Facebook as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Kelly. This is an exciting time for us because we partnered on a prior webinar series on online mental health and student wellness. But now we're going in a little bit of a different direction. But the one thing that we're continuing is our partnership with Dr. Kelly. We love you. We love what you do and what you bring. And so I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what's coming.
Well, thank you, George. I mean, the feelings are mutual. I appreciate, as always, the support, sponsorship of Eluma in bringing this content and material out to the field and to professionals working within education. We are starting a brand new series today. I'm excited about it. As George said, Office Hours with Dr. John Kelly. I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of psyched about that whole concept and kind of bringing some really exciting opportunities for us to learn together. But as I begin to think about today, I realized, you know, here I am, I'm going to be hosting this webinar series, and many people really may not know me or kind of what I'm all about. So just a real brief, I'm a school psychologist. I've been working within the schools, a proud school psychologist for 35 years. You know, working primarily at the high school level, but really doing work at the K through 12 level. And I say a proud school psychologist because I think that's important. It's part of who I am, part of my identity. I do work as an adjunct professor in a school psychology training program within New York, St. John's University. Go St. John's. I know my guest today, Charles, has a connection there to St. John's. We'll hear more about that in a little bit. And I've had honored positions of leadership at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. But quite honestly, what I really want you to know about me is that I'm passionate about the work that I do, that we do collectively for the children and the youth that we work with within education. And whether you work within the pre-K through 12 system, or you work at the higher education level training professionals, I think that passion is so critical for us to bring to it. And I'm so excited to hear from Charles today, because I know that's an area that Charles and I really bond together on this. But you know, what I love is sitting around and talking about big ideas, about having critical conversations, about these important topics. You know, how many times we sit with colleagues, we sit with friends, and we talk about these ideas and really how we can implement them within the field. And that's what this series is going to be all about. It's about talking about big ideas. It's about having critical conversations and not being afraid to kind of think outside the box on ways that we can benefit, once again, the children and youth that we work with all the time. So I'm inviting you and a few hundred of my closest colleagues to join us not only today, but for a series of webinars that we'll have throughout March and certainly starting back up late April into May. And looking forward to having that conversation, looking forward to hearing from you as you participate in this conversation. So I just wanted to welcome you to Office Hours with Dr. John Kelly. But more importantly, let's get on to tonight's guest. So Charles, if you could bring up the next slide here. So you can read Charles's bio here. You can read about Charles. In fact, many of you who are on tonight, I know that you know Charles, or you've heard about Dr. Charles Barrett. But what I love about my friend, Dr. Charles Barrett, is that he is authentic. And what I mean by that is what you're going to hear from Charles. It's not some theoretical basis that oftentimes is difficult to apply in a real life setting. No, what Charles is going to talk about is his lived experience. And what's even better about Dr. Barrett is this is who he is. He's a purpose-driven, passionate individual who truly values others for who they are and is always giving to others. Charles, I know that you know this, but you embody that mantra. It's always about the children. And we've heard that throughout the years of you talking. Charles is a school psychologist. He's an adjunct professor. He's a leader within the field of school psychology as well as education. He's an author. He's a gifted musician. He's a daily inspirer. And yes, at times he's a spiritual guide and just an incredible human being. He's been a guide to me, quite honestly, and a mentor to me in more ways than I think, Charles, you really realize. But I am blessed to call you a friend and a colleague. And so let me turn it over to Dr. Charles Barrett.
Thank you so much, John, and good to see you, George, as well. Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you might be. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited for the opportunity to share with you just my heart, my passion for not only school psychology and education, but for children. So we're going to talk about a number of things. This slide is redundant, but George and John convinced me to keep it in because it shows me playing piano. And I'll get to that a little bit as we go along today. But all these things, as John mentioned, all that means is that I really, truly love what I do as a school psychologist and just serving people as an educator. So certainly in our brief time that I have to present and share today, before John and I get into some really good discussion, 4 quick sections: a quick connection, some content, I want to give you a challenge, and then a quick closing. Connection, content, a quick challenge, and then a closing. So here's our connection. Whoever you might be, school psychologist, teacher, administrator, parent, guardian, sibling, I want you to make a promise to yourself, not to me, but to yourself, that every single day you're going to give yourself a break by taking a break. Take a break, whatever that means for you. Unplug, unwind. The idea of self-care has never been more important to really, kind of just give ourselves a moment to breathe and recharge, reset. And I know in schools, we tell children that they have to earn their break or earn access to their reinforcer. And that's important, but I wanted to bend the rules for us today and every day, that you don't have to earn that rest or that break, but really you deserve it by virtue of being alive, by virtue of being a person. So every single day, just do that for me. Give yourself a break by taking a break. Whenever I have the honor of presenting and sharing with people, there's a couple things that are just kind of crucial or central to who I am. And primarily, it's always to encourage people, never to be critical, even when I'm sharing things that might challenge your practice, which is not going to be tonight, but always want people to leave encouraged in what they're doing. But today, I want to share some information, motivation, but also inspiration, regardless of your role as an educator or a person serving children. So that's going to be our focus today. And here's our content. It's always about the children. Educators bring in their whole selves to the profession. Whatever you do, how do you bring your whole self to the profession? I wrote this book to really not talk about what we do, but really why we do it. We go to graduate school, we go to college, we get good training, good education about technical skills and competencies, but more than what we do, why do we do that? Why are we serving children in our various roles as educators? So another way of saying that is talk about purpose. We're going to talk about passion and how those things lead to not only your own potential, but the potential of young people, the potential of the children that you are serving in your respective capacity. Wrote this book about 4 years ago, and it was in my, I was embarking on my 10th year of practice, and it really was a book that wrote itself. And I wanted to give people, other psychologists, school psychologists, or educators a window into how I thought and my views around practicing school psychology, but again, serving children, families, schools, and communities. So the first chapter talks about my story. And I think that we all have a story, a journey that leads us from where we were to where we are now as professionals. I want to give you a quick overview of my story. And I started out, of course, elementary school, and I grew up in New York, not too far from where John Kelly practices. I'm a Long Island guy, grew up in Freeport, Long Island, Nassau County. And as a first grader, I had a significant stutter. So even talking to you now this evening is something that I would never do, never volunteer to do, never spoke in class, all those things. But I had speech therapy from first grade through through sixth grade. And my elementary speech pathologist was Valerie Schwinger. Up until last night, we were talking. So this is over 30 years ago, I met Miss Schwinger, and she really helped me with my speech and my disfluency. Never, ever forget her. Just grateful for who she is in my life. By a junior in high school, this is my high school, Freeport High School, go Red Devils. I knew that I wanted to be an educator. I thought about being a high school English teacher, always loved reading and writing. But if not that, then I was going to be a speech pathologist. Went to St. John's University, where John Kelly also teaches. And like many students, money was an issue. So I went in as a speech and English major, got a scholarship to do research, ended up working with this fine gentleman, Dr. Raymond DiGiuseppe, who was a clinical child and school psychologist. And he turned me on to school psychology. I was between maybe child psychology or becoming a teacher at the end of my undergrad career. And he said, well, based on what you want to do, work with kids, you like schools, school psych might be the path for you. And I liked him, I trusted him, felt that he had my best interest at heart. And he told me about this wonderful place, Lehigh University, that top left image, is where I went to graduate school, got my training. But my church in Queens, New York, had a camp. If there was any doubt that I wanted to work with children, that was totally confirmed my freshman year of college. Again, went there to make some money as a camp counselor and spent 7 weeks upstate New York. And these boys from urban areas in New York really changed my life and really confirmed that I had to work with kids long term. So that's kind of my path, how I got here, some of my own limitations, weaknesses in speech, but really having this conviction that I had to work with children is kind of how I got to being a school psychologist. But think about this for me as we go along. What do you have in your hand? Meaning, what is your unique area of gifting? I send a daily notification inspiration to people every day for the last couple of years, but more than what you can do, what motivates you and is personally fulfilling? I don't have many guarantees in life, and we'll come back to this later on, but one thing I can guarantee is that every single person in this world, you, your children, your students, your colleagues, coworkers, every single person has a gift, and that's what you have in your hand. That's what you were born with, some supernatural ability to do something naturally well without much effort or training. What gifting do you have? We're going to go on and talk about that. So what also makes you unique? What makes you kind of stand out in the crowd amongst your colleagues and those around you? There's a popular show that we all heard about, America's Got Talent, and all of us have talent. But sometimes we focus on these specialized skills. We go to college and graduate school and we prepare to be educators, pedagogy and curriculum, assessment, instruction. But what I want you to do is, as you think about your gifting, the things that you do naturally well, almost innately, I want you to allow your gifts to really allow you to serve those skills that you have been developing over time. So don't forget about what you were doing long before you became a teacher, long before you became a superintendent or an assistant principal or a school psychologist. Your training will qualify you to help children, your degrees, your credentials, but don't forget about your talent and allow those tools to serve your talents. I'm going to show you a picture here. These are all of our intersecting identities that we all have: race, class, gender, sexuality. All of these things make us who we are. I want to read something to you very quickly, then show you another image in a moment. What about the things that make you unique? What makes you an individual? The things that you were doing long before you became an educator. Not only do these personal experiences make us who we are, but we should also bring these things to our professional practices as educators. So here's a picture of me a couple years ago. I cut my hair after 16 years. So this bald look is kind of going back to how I grew up as a kid, but I play, or used to play, in all of my schools around the holidays. And long before school psychology, long before college, grad school, I'm still a musician. I grew up playing since I was 6 years old. But this was a way that I also connected to kids. I built relationship with students, that Mr. Barrett wasn't just a guy who, talks to kids or has these fun games, but he does things that we do. I play the piano or I play the trumpet. So it kind of made me a regular person that allowed me to connect to children and families in a more meaningful way. So I allowed my musical capability, musical gifting, to serve me in the practice of school psychology. I wrote this chapter a couple of years ago in the book, Gumbo for the Soul, and it talks about my speech impediment not being a speed bump, but a stepping stone. And I was embarrassed in first grade. I remember going home crying about, having disfluency in class, but it wasn't until years later, when I'm now a professional, probably 30, 35 years later, that I really realized that stuttering was one of the biggest blessings of my life. It's given me tremendous perspective as a clinician, as a psychologist, as an educator. It's made me more patient. It's given me the opportunity to reflect on what I needed as a student and how can I provide that to students and families. So just take a moment, think about, this text on the screen. I won't read it to you, but I really came to a place where I'm grateful for my disfluency. Even now as an adult, I still stutter at times, and it used to bother me, but it really has given me such a tremendous outlook that I wouldn't have had I not overcome, and still overcoming. I was telling Ms. Schwinger, my speech therapist, that I am a lifelong stutterer, and that's something that I've become to embrace and really kind of incorporate into my identity. So I'm grateful for that. So whatever your limitations might be, weaknesses that you might have, those are not speed bumps designed to stop you, but they're stepping stones to get you from where you are to where you'll be, and to be certainly helpful to others around you. There's this thing going around maybe last year or so, how it started versus how it's going. And if you would have told me that I'm going to be speaking to people a couple times a week, audiences of hundreds of people, quite regularly, that just was not who I was. Even going through graduate school and undergrad, people misunderstood me because I was so quiet. He's disinterested, doesn't want to be here. But that was just my fear of engaging in disfluency. So this just kind of shows you that how it started for you sometimes has nothing to do with how it's going. So you can definitely overcome those things and use them as tools to, again, serve your gifting but also serve the people that you will encounter as an educator. Think about this. Why did you become an educator? And I'm going to give you an answer that has nothing to do with school psychology, and maybe even nothing to do with education. And for me, it always comes back to two things: hope and wholeness, inspiring hope in people and making sure that everyone is whole, regardless of what you're going through. So it could be walking a parent through the process of their child having a disability, or talking to a kid about their anxiety or their coping skills. I want everyone around me that I encounter to have hope and to be whole. That's what it always comes back to for me. So whatever I'm doing, counseling, writing, teaching, my why is really informed by these broader ideas of hope and wholeness, and bringing that to the practice. For any of you out there, George, John, with your vast connections, you can call Miss Winfrey and tell her that Charles Barrett wants to sit on her couch, on her wicker chair on Super Soul Sunday. And when Miss Winfrey calls me to come on, I am ready. She used to always ask this question at the end of her interviews: what do you know for sure? And my response would be this: that every single person has a gift. And the gift is not about academics. It's not about, test scores and going from high school to the Ivy League or community college or college. It's about, again, what do you do exceptionally well with almost little to no training, your natural inclination. Here are some examples of gifting. Teaching is a gift. Leadership can be a gift. Administration, helping, all of these things are examples of gifts, and just some ideas about how I might define some of these concepts. And I'm mindful to say that I'm saying teaching and not being a teacher, or the gift of administration without being an administrator. So regardless of your role or the function that you might serve in a school system or school district, the activity of what you're doing. I know gifted teachers or people who are gifted in teaching who are not teachers. So you might not be in a formal leadership position, but you can still have the gift of leadership to influence people. So think about all these things, and yours might not be on here. But I want to also underscore this idea that with gifting, the beautiful thing, especially working in schools, in our teaming structures, is that you only need one. But when my gift of teaching connects with John's gift of leadership, and George's gift of helping, and Chris's gift of administration, all of these things become this beautiful puzzle, and we really make significant changes in the lives of people. So don't worry about having more than one. Focused on the one gift that you have. And you might have more than one, that's great too, but we all need one, and when we connect and work together in the interest of kids, that's how we really make tremendous impact. I was giving an IQ test some time ago, and a 13-year-old kid told me that purpose is something you're meant for. Wasn't the right answer according to the test manual, but a really cool perspective on purpose, something you are meant for. But I would say this: you have a gift that enables you to fulfill your purpose or your why. Your teaching, your administration, your leadership can help you fulfill your why, whatever that might be for you. But also think about this: your students have gifts that, when they're recognized, supported, encouraged, that will also empower them to fulfill their purpose. One of the things about education I think that we can all do a better job at is not being so focused on the academic strengths and every kid going to college. That's great. That was my path. That was many of your paths on this webinar today. But you may have students that might not be their story. But whatever their gift is, help them to identify that, encourage it, and then they'll also be empowered to fulfill their purpose. My good friend, Dr. McClure, Byron McClure, says, shifting from what's wrong with students to what's strong in them. He's going to be on later in the series as well. So what gifts, what makes their face light up when you talk to them? Focus on that, celebrate that, acknowledge that, and then certainly positive outcomes will come. We've all heard this, I'm sure, from kids. You don't know me, Mr. Barrett. or you're too familiar, high school students that, things like that. But at the core of what we do as educators, another idea that's critical is this idea of relationship and taking time to really get to know people as individuals. So I want to share this, that Dr. James Comer says, no real learning happens in the absence of real relationship. Noted child psychiatrist, significant learning is a product of significant relationship and authentic connection to students. So how do we build community that really values all kids, all young people, all students? And that's how they really learn. That's how they make progress. That's how they really grow and develop. So really think about how you can build relationship. For me, one of the ways that I did that really early on in my career, first day of school, my first year, was I started doing bus duty. It wasn't a part of my job, but there are relationships I built with teachers, with families, with kids 13 years ago. Some of them have finished college and we still keep in touch, and I met them on bus duty. So find a way to connect to your school, to connect to your community. Chapter 2 in the book that I referenced, It's Always About the Children, it's kind of the heart of the book. And it talks about these skills that were not always taught in graduate school or in undergrad, but nonetheless significant to really making an impact and to be effective. So people assume you have competency to test and to teach and counsel, but do they understand you? Do they know your investment in their students, in their children? So find a way to plug in to a school. For me, it was bus duty, and I enjoyed every single day learning kids' names, greeting families. It really broke down a lot of barriers and division between the school and the community when we're just kind of out there on their turf, where parents are, where kids are, and meeting them where they are to really form those authentic connections. So here's my challenge to you. I want you to remember that every single person has a gift. You have a gift, your students, your children have gifts. And my closing would be this, again, taken from an interview with Toni Morrison and Oprah Winfrey. When a kid walks in the room, your child or anybody else's child, does your face light up? That's my closing. Does your face light up? People ask me about, becoming a school psychologist and what, my advice is, and I always give the same answer. The first thing I say is make sure you like children. Nothing deep, nothing complicated. Make sure you like kids. And kids have a way of knowing whether you like them or not. So let your face speak what's in your heart. And hopefully what's in your heart is love for children. Kids will pick up on it, but really, does your face light up when you talk about kids, when you see kids? I hope mine still does, because I still love serving students as a school psychologist. But that's my challenge to you. When a kid walks in the room, your child, anyone's child, does your face light up when you see them? So thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing now and chat with my good friend, Dr. John Kelly.
Charles. Oh man, I gotta be honest, I'm sitting there furiously jotting down notes, little pearls of wisdom, things I want to bring to my practice, things I want to tweet out. You have a gift that empowers you to fulfill your purpose. What a powerful statement. What a powerful statement, Charles. I'm so impressed, my friend. And I've heard you speak so many times, but each and every time that I hear you speak, it just, again, I pick up on these little things, these new things. But let's spend a little time, if it's okay. Yeah. Let's dive in on some of these concepts, because again, I taken lots of notes here, and I kind of heard I heard four big areas, four kind of these big ideas that you talked about, and I hope I captured them properly. But yeah, I heard you talk about purpose. I heard you talk about passion, about gifting, and relationships. And you are, you're speaking my language, my friend. All of those are on a personal level as well as professional level so important to me. And I think that they play a crucial role for us, both personally as well as professionally. So if we can, let's dive into each one of those areas for just a little bit, and
Sure.
maybe help some of our audience members think and reflect a little bit on this. This is what I love to do, by the way. This is why I love office hours and having these big conversations, because we just we'll kind of riff off of different ideas that come out. But let's start with purpose for a moment, because we always hear people talk about discover your why, or go back to your why when we're reflecting on our purpose. What does that really mean? And why do you think that's so important in our work with kids?
So I think it's, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Oh, good.
Great. I think why is important because the nature of the job of working with students or working in education, it's challenging. And I think the last 2 years have been some of the most challenging for anyone. If you're an experienced educator, if you're a new educator, it was a challenging season. And we're still kind of in the throes of the pandemic and what that means for education. But why, I believe, anchors you beyond the challenges that are inevitable. So if I came to be a school psychologist to work in schools, when schools closed, I'm frustrated. If I came to be a school psychologist because I enjoy testing, I enjoy counseling, when those things might not be a part of my role, then I'm unfulfilled. But why, to me, is a broader realization that the profession or the role is simply a vehicle to help me accomplish my purpose in life. So if I wasn't a school psychologist, I would still be encouraging people. If I wasn't a teacher, I would still be encouraging people. You got me previewing my message for tomorrow morning, John, but I was thinking about my life just over the past 30 years. And I came to this realization that I was always encouraging people. As a musician, I've been a church music director, I've written cantatas, and all of that was about communicating hope and wholeness to people in different ways. Now, I don't play like I used to play or as often as I used to play, but I'm still communicating those messages in my teaching as I practice school psychology. So I think that the role that we play, teacher, psychologist, administrator, dean, that's simply an avenue. It's a way to accomplish why, but we live more fulfilled lives when the purpose surpasses the role. And I think too many times we're focused on, well, I got this job title, now I'm happy. When the job changes, when the job goes away, then you can be quite unfulfilled and frustrated. So that's why I think why is so important. It gives us an kind of a grounding beyond the temporary role of the position.
Hey, John, I had a quick question.
Go ahead, George, please.
One of the things, if I may interject, is one of the things I found most resonant with me is when you were talking about your stuttering, your speech impediment, and you said it's not a challenge but a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And I really loved that. That really connected with me. And you talked, we talk about in this day and age, we talk about privilege. But I heard someone say, a very wise person say, that sometimes the greatest affliction is the lack thereof. And that it is through our challenges that we find who we are and we find our true purpose. And I'd love for you to maybe elaborate a little bit about, how your impediment was a stepping stone for you. What was it that gave you, and what did it give you? I mean,
yeah, I appreciate that. So I have 4 brothers, and as a kid, stuttering, even as an adult, still stuttering, I did not understand why I was the only one who stuttered. My dad's side of the family, a couple of my dad does, a couple of my aunts and uncles stutter, but in my immediate family, it was just me, and that really bothered me. But as I got older, and it wasn't until I was in meetings actually and talking to students, talking to kids who stuttered, or talking to parents who stuttered, I understood how people could misperceive them or misunderstand them. And because I had been in their shoes literally and still am in some ways. I get how that feels. I don't think I would have had that sensitivity. I would have had that patience, because I've had people talk over me because I couldn't get the words out fast enough, or because I was quiet, that they misinterpreted that as disinterested and not as engaged. And because I really just didn't like speaking publicly, it made me a much better listener, and I think helps me as a psychologist. So all of those experiences, people could argue that, well, you could develop, being sensitive and all those things, and that's true, but it's such an authentic part of my practice that I couldn't simply learn or develop. But it was really through lived experience. I remember my parents kind of, talking to people, he stutters, so you got to give him time. There's a story I shared on Facebook some time ago. I went back to my old elementary school to see my third grade teacher, who had since become a principal. And the secretary that I had as a kid was still working for her. And she said, "Charles Barrett, is that you?" I said, "Yeah, it's me." And she said, "Your dad yelled at me when you were a kid." And I know he didn't yell, but he was very stern with her. And he said to her, he said, "You have to give him time, he stutters." So I've always had, this advocate. My parents were strong advocates for us, my brothers and I. So even that experience, knowing what I needed, from my parents, it helps me give other families perspective on what they should be doing to advocate for their students. So again, all those things are things I lived and experienced that I feel in a very real way. The conviction is more than I read in a book or it's good practice. This is good for life because it helped me in my life. So I hope that helps answer your question, George, but it really comes down for me, it's lived experience.
I mean, I love that. And I really, not to hijack this discussion at all, John, but I do love the idea that our perceived weaknesses are actually vehicles for us to become our truer selves and to have strengths that we might not otherwise have.
Correct.
No, George, you're right on target there. And I think it's such a powerful concept because, again, when we work in education, inevitably we're going to work with children who have their own challenges, who have their own obstacles to overcome and hurdles to master. And if we take that sense, of not looking at as defining the person, and allowing to define who they are, but being part of them. And I love your dad. And then sorry to the secretary who felt yelled at, but I love hearing your dad, like, being that advocate, and I know a little bit about your background, Charles. You and I are friends, and we've talked about your upbringing and just the passion, the purpose, that certainly you gained from your own family. Has been so critical, and I love, when we were talking just a moment ago about purpose, and when your purpose, you talk about it not just being the role, and for you was that hope and wholeness, such a critical piece. Let's talk a little bit about passion, kind of the second big area, because this is something that I had said about myself, and I wanted people to know about me. I'm just extremely passionate about the work that I do, and I think it's so important. I mean, there's so many quotes out there on passion. I think there's one, we'll bring in Oprah. Maybe if we quote Oprah enough, she'll somehow gain attention. But I think Oprah talked about passion as energy. Passion is energy, and you have to feel the power that comes from focusing on what excites you. And so, that sense of having that passion, having it excite you. They talk about, passion being something, where people with great passion can do impossible things, or just simply the phrase, live your life with passion. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, Charles, what is passion, and what energy do you derive from that passion?
Yeah, passion to me is, I like the energy idea, but I would say that passion for me is what fuels or drives me. So I'm probably the worst person for work-life balance. I'll just say that honestly. I get up early, I go to bed at night because I'm driven by what I do. And it rarely feels like work. If it's talking to students, if I meet people on social media, I really mean it. Call me, email me. We're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about, school psychology or whatever's on your mind. So passion is what drives me because it's also connected to purpose. So I'm not passionate about things that are not aligned with hope and wholeness. I was telling someone earlier today that, sometimes people reach out, for me to do things, and it's an honor to be asked. But I'm also selective about what I do if it's not aligned to what I'm about. And there are many other people out there who are doing great work. So I'm happy to pass that on because I want to bring energy. I want to bring that kind of driven kind of sense of urgency and excitement. But I only do that for things that are really aligned to what I'm passionate about. When I taught, at my church, I wouldn't just teach any topic. I taught what I was energized by, and that came out in my teaching. So I think sometimes what people misconstrue as, well, he's a good teacher, or she's a good teacher, or they're good at whatever they're doing, it's really this kind of this alignment of purpose and passion that comes out as effectiveness. So if I'm not passionate about something, I just don't do it because I'm not driven by it. And there's too many things out here, or too many people who can do other things. Focus on what you do well, and kind of having a more refined picture of what your life can be. That to me is how I kind of help to balance, my time, but really being fueled by something beyond money, beyond recognition. It just naturally comes out of me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Charles. And I know I mentioned, I've been working in the schools for 35 years now, and it's been fueled by that passion. It's not the money. We know that those of us working in education are not going to become millionaires, but at the same time, it's really fueled by that passion. So I love that piece. I think another area that really resonates between you and I, quite honestly, is that sense of gifting. I think that for me, giving to others and sharing our gifts truly brings meaning to our life. I think that that's an important piece. I believe in living an outward bound life. I think that is part of our passion. It's part of our purpose to live an outward bound life. So, I'm wondering, as you think about, us as educators, giving our gifts, sharing our talents with others, how can we bring that to our work with children? How do we bring that sense of giving to that work that we do with kids?
So I think one of the biggest reframes that I've done in my career, it was probably earlier on, but still a reframe, is I shifted from, working for a school or working for a school district to serving people. And really, if there are two things I think most industries are driven by or should be driven by, it's relationship and service. So it tends to be, we do that in accounting or in finance or in school psychology or whatever industry, but the job is really relationship. It's people. And when you serve people, the dividends just come. So when I was sharing about connecting to your school community, that's service, and that's a gift to give of yourself in a certain way. The other things I was talking about as far as gifting was, things beyond your training, but that can still be a bridge to connect to other people or to serve people. So when I was, playing at my schools, that was a gift that I think I could give to the school community and use it as a bridge to, form connection or form relationships. This idea that we can learn anything, that's for the most part true. You can learn how to do things, but there's an effect that I believe you can't learn, and that's the how that gift is felt by other people. So when I was a kid, I was playing, I took lessons, but music came fairly easy for me. And I would have, parents, approach me, well, can you teach my son how to play, and my daughter how to play, or my child how to play? And I would do that. And they would say, well, I want them to do what you do. And this is not an arrogant statement, but I said, I can't teach them that because I don't know how to teach you that. What you're hearing is my passion, my gifting, my experience sometimes. But I can certainly show you technique, but the gifting again comes back to aligning purpose, aligning that with passion, but also giving of yourselves in service to the profession. Do we have to balance overextending? Yes, we do. But I think the starting place is, how am I here to serve the students, serve the families, serve the staff? And that really is a tremendous gift that we can all learn to practice or develop.
Yeah, that short little story you spoke about, teach me how to play like you, teach me how to do what you do. It reminds me of something that I often say to my graduate students, that you're all going to have your own style. You're all going to be unique in your own way. I don't want you to have John Kelly style.
Correct.
I tell them that, develop your own style. If you see things you like in what we do, that's wonderful. But at the same time, you are unique, kind of be your own self. Charles, I have to be honest, I'm smiling here because you've just highlighted relationships. And for friends of mine who may be listening now or listening on demand later on, I've been known to say that relationships are the basis of everything that we do.
Everything.
I believe it within my heart. All of our work with children exists within the context of the relationship that we build with them. And that's been part of my passion. I know you spoke about Dr. James Comer and developing those meaningful relationships. And I actually have a favorite quote, and I had to write it down because I didn't want to forget it. Brene Brown, and I won't share kind of the backstory on why this is so meaningful for me, but Brene Brown said, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. When they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. And for me, that's just so powerful and so meaningful. I'm wondering, as you talk about relationships and the value of relationships, how do we develop those meaningful relationships with kids? Because as professionals, we're often talk about boundaries and keeping the individuals we work with at a certain distance. And hey, don't get me wrong, I'm all about boundaries. I think that's important.
Yeah.
But I also believe it's important to relate on a human level. Can you talk a little bit about that as it relates to those relationships and the value of building those human connections?
So I would share this quick story. So I grew up in church. My dad's a minister, my grandfather was a pastor for a long time. So a lot of my experiences came from that setting. I remember a pastor told me, her name was Lillian Ferguson, and she said that good conversation is really following the lead of the person. And I really took that, I was a kid, but I took that to heart. So I would say for relationship is you follow the lead of the kid. What is the kid excited about? Is it their softball game? Is it Minecraft? Is it science? Is it music? And you value what the kid has to say. And when you show genuine interest in what they care about, that is a strong leverage point to build relationship. I think about my mentors growing up, mostly in music, but they were genuinely interested in me as a person, not just the music or not just whatever thing we were working on. Even going back to Ray Giuseppe at St. John's, I believe he cared about me as a person, and he told me the truth about school psychology. So he wanted me to be happy in my profession, but I think it's showing genuine interest in what the person is interested in. And that builds authentic connection and relationship. You know, going back to the whole bus duty example, that was just one way to show investment in the community. And when teachers see that, when families see that, that you genuinely care about their students, about their children, then I believe they are more likely to listen to what you have to say. School psychologists and others, we often have the right answer, the right intervention, the right approach. What people are leery of is not the skill set, it's, I don't know John to believe what he's saying is going to work for my kid, or I don't know Charles to believe that that intervention is actually the best for this student. So when we really show that we are genuinely interested, maybe giving back before we ask for anything. So before I was asking to observe kids and get rating scales back and teach to collect data, I was, shaking hands at bus duty, giving back before you ask for anything, out of the system or out of individuals. That can also be a powerful leverage point. But I would say really it's about showing genuine interest in what the kid is interested in. That is a powerful thing. And they believe that you care about them as people. And when something that they want to share comes up, they'll find you because they believe that you really are there for them as individuals.
Yeah, I just, again, I just find that so powerful just as a concept for us as educators to really embrace, the value of basic human dignity, respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're 6 years old, 16 years old, 60 years old. I think that we all just want to feel valued. We want to feel as though we're treated with dignity.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's why I believe that relationships are just so important. So I really appreciate, you kind of highlighting those pieces.
No worries.
Charles, I want to shift just for a moment. You brought up our good friend, Dr. Byron McClure, who will be on next week. I'm going to give a quick shout out. Byron's going to be with us next week. And you talked about, one of Byron's famous quotes of moving from what's wrong to what's strong. And I think it goes directly to sometimes where we get caught up in schools of this deficit thinking. When we look at students, it kind of goes back to George, your question before of how Charles and how others can use challenges in their life to really propel them forward. And it's that sense of moving from what's wrong to what's strong. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on kind of some of these big ideas of passion, purpose, relationships, gifting, and how we can move from what's wrong to what's strong using some of those big ideas.
So I would start with seeing every kid as gifted in some way, seeing every child as having something that they do well, almost instinctively. It might not be academic, it might not be what we value currently as educators or a public education system, but seeing where does this child shine? Where does this child thrive? What excites them? And I do believe if we tap into that, we can really promote positive outcomes. There are kids that I've met, working in schools that serve students primarily from Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, sometimes coming to Virginia with no formal education. But even those students had gifting. They had an area of interest, of passion. The challenge was for us to find that or identify it or help the kid identify that. But I think it starts with this basic assumption that there's gifting in this student and it might not look like how I'm looking for it. How can we broaden our perspective to really see how all students can shine, and then build opportunities around them for them to demonstrate those skills, those areas of gifting. I mean, it might not be a popular opinion, but everyone is not going to go to college, and that's okay. But I think what we can do is prepare all children to be successful and to be independent and to be contributing members of society, be that college for some, be that trade school for others, be that other avenues. So I think it's broadening, kind of looking inward and broadening how we think about education, how we think about serving students. But certainly I would say is assuming that every child has a gift and trying to identify that gift, that spark that excites them. I've never met anyone who knew their gift and was not excited about that gifting. It's just a part of you, and something that I believe that you can't really stop doing. You know, sending out my morning inspiration, it's going on almost 6 years now, and I'm just driven by that because it's a part of me, encouraging people. So when children find that, I have a hard time believing that they won't be excited about using it and further developing it. But that's our job, to help them find it and support them in further developing those gifts inside of them.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's such a critical piece. I know our hour is quickly coming to a close here. I do want to give opportunity to answer a couple questions maybe from the audience. I do need to just tap into one last area. I think it's really critical for us to acknowledge that the last couple of years, and you kind of alluded to this, Charles, have been really, really tough.
Yeah.
And here we're talking about bringing passion, we're talking about bringing purpose, bring our best selves to our jobs so that we can benefit children. But I do want to acknowledge that many of us working in education, we're worn out. And I feel I need to say that. What can, in 1 minute, can we say to our colleagues out there that are kind of feeling that sense of being worn out?
The word of the day, of the year, of the month, the last 2 years for me has been grace. It's giving yourself grace and giving your colleagues grace, that enough for the moment is often going to be enough. And really reframing what we think success is. Part of the tragedy of the pandemic, I would say, is if we revert back to pre-2020 ways of life in every area. I miss going out without a mask on, all those things like others, but there were some things that were not working for us. So I do think we have to rethink life, this rat race of doing more, to buy more, to work more, to maintain what we buy. It was just not working. And in some ways we could not maintain that level of activity. So I would say give yourself grace that if you got up today and got to the end of the day, you were successful. Maybe your to-do list is still long and you were not as productive as you think you should have been. That's all subjective. Grace, I would say, is giving yourself time and space to know that enough for today is more than enough. So give yourself grace, your colleagues grace, can be very helpful for our overall well-being.
Well, thank you for that. Really appreciate that, Charles. George, I know you've been monitoring the chat box. We have a few minutes left. Let's see if we get to at least one or two questions from our audience tonight.
Yeah, let's skip up to a question from Justin H. Dove. And I think this is probably the only question we have time for, but his question is, what are your ideas about how we can push for increased community care and structural care while simultaneously attending to our self-care needs?
Justin Dove, man, hard question for 1 minute to respond. I'll try. We can chat offline about this some more. So the simple answer is what I tell my students. I was teaching on Monday night, and I said that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, meaning we can advocate for kind of these at one level while also still challenging systems to do better. So as you take your own time to engage in whatever taking a break for you means, or your own self-care activities. That's not really a term that I use, but I know it's a popular term. We can also expect more from larger systems to really be more effective for more groups of people. Ultimately, the daily things that we do individually are not the answer. So for teachers, it's not the jeans day, or it's not, whatever we do to kind of make teachers feel good, a pass to leave early one day, or whatever it is, but really reframing how we do business. On some level, I do think it's people in positions of policy that set expectations. So if that's your school board, if that's your locally elected officials, board of supervisors, mayor, whoever controls those local entities, how do we apply consistent pressure for them to have different expectations of what we do long term? That's the broad answer. We can chat offline, but I think one strategy is consistently raising the issue. So it's public comment at meetings for the school board, it's public comment in other settings. What I know about politicians is that they do not ignore their constituents. When everyone is saying the same message, that has an effect on policy. Maybe not easy or short or shortly acquired, but it does happen over time. But hopefully that helps to at least get started, Justin, and we can chat more. I'll send you a message on Facebook and we can continue.
And the only thing I would add to that, quite honestly, is, I'm always reminded when we do our own work. And I think that hopefully tonight, that's what I'm hearing from Charles, of looking at our passion, developing that purpose, valuing the relationships and giving to others, living that outward bound life. In many ways, we're doing our own work in that way. And it helps to change that system. It allows us to kind of move to some of that systems level work that we often really recognize. As Charles said, it's not the individual actions, it's oftentimes changing that system. So let me just thank Dr. Charles Barrett, my good friend and colleague, my mentor, my spiritual guide, my daily inspirer. Each and every day, Charles, you bring something to the table. And so tonight, you absolutely brought your own passion, your own purpose, your own gifting, and the value of relationships to our conversation tonight. So thank you for being with us tonight.